and just tears and like hearing stuff and floating over this desecrated Western Indian civilization that I was a chief of, right? And I'd come out of it like, what the fuck is going on? Like, where's this stuff coming from, right? Next morning, put on a suit and tie, go work at a hedge fund. And it'd be like 2:00. I'd be like, I just got to make it through the day. It is literally the forgotten domain of our current human culture, our global community. We do not spend enough time right here in our hearts because our rational self is very on edge about an old memory, an old sensation, an old feeling. It's kind of like this ancient weeping willow sense of heart spilling. And I don't know, it feels cultural, karmic, and Gaia-like, and just weeping and weeping. That led me to studying lamenting and sadness. Sadness and mourning are tools that that literally keep me in the game, still keep me in. I find that there's times when I'm like, oh, I haven't cried in a while, I haven't mourned in a while. Mm-hmm. And when I do that, it completely puts my gears back into the 3D plane. Mm-hmm. Like there's something about that native weeping sense of lamenting that transports me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the sort of loss that they would experience over and over and over for hundreds of years. It was a series of different civilizational collapses that just got more and more intense, so
big time.
There's a lot to still process there.
And what's amazing is here in Atlanta, mm-hmm. It's even deeper. It's even deeper when I'm here. And I spent a lot of time here in the last couple of years, but especially in the last, 5, 6, 7 months. And I'm looking at these pine trees and I can see the tree that's 250 years old right down there. And that tree down behind where I do a little run has got to be minimum 250 to 300 years old. I think I can do this and that doesn't even get me halfway around. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a big ass colonial era tree. Yeah. And I think there's just so much memory in those trees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Spilled blood and joy and conflict and love and all that stuff.
My first book, the theme that I used for the entire book was one of lament and loss.
Really?
Coming to terms with what has already passed and being a kind of ghost whisperer, I guess, in a way, like being able to tell the stories that the ghosts, so to speak, of our families, our culture are really crying from their graves, telling and coming to an awareness and a kind of ability to process the loss is what's really needed right now.
How did you get to that layer?
I had a professor in graduate school who was a professor of modern German history. By modern, I mean it in the technical sense of like from certain periods, like 1799 to about World War II is when it kind of ends, or a little bit earlier. But he had spent his entire life basically studying, Germans. He was studying the high points of German imperial culture, and he loved it. He adored it. And another way of saying that is he studied white people. He loved white culture and everything we had come to associate with white culture. Not the bad parts necessarily, but I mean, it was his, and he loved it, and he felt alienated from the academy specifically and the professors around him, but he also felt alienated. Yeah, exactly. He felt alienated by the culture itself, and how something about Western white culture had started to eat back in on itself. Something about the liberal notion of individualism or whatever was corrosive towards itself. In certain respects, I agree with the description that he would offer when he explained why he was so sad. The difference is I wasn't sad about those changes. I wasn't feeling it in the way that he was feeling it, but I felt sympathy or empathy for him. And there was something about his truth telling, which some of the things that he would say in classes people would easily call him racist or chauvinistic. They were problematic things. They were, but something about the interaction I had with him made it real clear that he was hurting and that it was going to be necessary if my task, and I felt like it was then, and I still kind of do, if my task was to kind of help him not come to another side, but just get more comfortable with the winds of change. If I could do that at all, it was going to require lament. He had to mourn. He was not in the position where he was able to mourn. And so in some ways, I didn't really like this guy, but in a lot of ways, he became who I wrote the book for.
Wow. So you got to activate really someone else's need to lament, which brought you a ton of information on the subject.
Yeah. And I came to realize that, no, it wasn't just him, it wasn't just folks on the right. It wasn't just readers of the National Review who are in need of this kind of work. It's men in general. I think it may or may not be localizable to the West, but who cares one way or another? Like, there's enough of us in the West who need to do some serious soul searching work and process grief, that the grief we hold, if it's not processed by the folks where it happened initially, it gets transmitted down, It
all gets transmitted down. That is the thesis of my book. It all gets sent down the line.
So just imagine, how much we're left to process. So, and
then you look at the Black, I know we're going to move on, but then you look at the Black community, right? And spending a lot of time in Atlanta. You have the disenfranchised, the current disenfranchisement for the last 400 years. And then they were disenfranchised by their own fellow tribesmen in Africa, right? And then really they've been written out of history, right? All history is based on so there's this long line of lamentation, but you have to get to the anger first.
There's a lot to process.
That first layer is the anger, and then you can get to the lamenting
But that's a wonderful point to bring race into it as far as contemporary issues, right? Like, in order to lament, in order to grieve, you have to be in a space where you can trust that you're safe. The fact is, if you don't feel safe, you're not in a position to do grief work or healing work or shadow work, any of those kinds of things.
In the material demands that my family has, we're the pack mules. You're the young pack mule now, right? Because you're whether your wife's making money or not, we're still in that role, and we chose to come back as males and as fathers and as husbands and as worker bees. And I really, when I've had my break, it was really difficult to engage this world. I was literally I had money in the bank, and I'm like, I got money in the bank, right? And then 3-4 years goes by, and then I fucking no money in the bank, right? So then I'm just getting jobs hey, just pay me whatever, pay me subsistence. I would come in with all the skill set and just pay me subsistence because I'm like, I don't care, kind of cavalier, kind of that spiritual chip on my shoulder. I finally appreciate who I am, what I've done, and I can sit and look back and go, holy shit, this was a hell of the last 25 fucking years. I started meditating 25 years ago, and I've literally just over the last 2 years, kind of the gears have all kind of come together. And so exhaling in a way, like a big exhale. I know this is much too long an answer, but it's amazing because it's really not just my life. I feel like I've started to close the energetic, karmic, psycho-emotional, biomagnetic loop on. I finally crossed over. I feel like I am becoming the elder I always wanted to be. And I've heard that elder. And I can't tell you how many hours I've sat in my silence at midnight by myself and going elders, and feel like I am this elder out in the West and have this image and almost a name around that archetype and that energy I feel. But now I feel like it's starting to actually be who I am, not a joy, not a vision, not a want, not a desire. It's almost like the desire and the current of me is that. And,
so there's no separation. There's no nagging.
The separation has almost disappeared.
Wow.
It's almost disappeared. And, in the white suburban world, I knew it would take the inner self-satisfaction of having some money in the bank, not to the level that a lot of my buddies have, like incalculable amounts of money. They got lifetimes of money in the bank. I just needed to feel in my body, in the 3D plane, in my career, in my daily career. I didn't realize that I needed to have that to really begin.
How was that piece of the transition? So I get it's easy enough to get the weight of your conversion or the transformation you experience through sitting down, through mindfulness, through meditation. But practically, it had to have been had its challenges. It
was, think of difficulty. That's just my experience of it. And think of 2 standard deviations and add another 2 standard deviations as an example. And it's really when I decided I want to write the book. This was 22 years ago this month. At night, I would literally be on the ground, writhing in tears, caught in the Kundalini, the vapors and the convulsions I would be in my living room floor in Wilton, Connecticut at 1 o'clock in the morning with 3 young kids, 2 at that point, and just tears and like hearing stuff and floating over this desecrated Western Indian civilization that I was a chief of, right? And I'd come out of it like, what the fuck is going on? Like, where's this stuff coming from, right? Next morning, put on a suit and tie, go work at a hedge fund. And it'd be like 2 o'clock. I'd be like, I just got to make it through the day. I don't think I'm going to make it through the day. I would go into the bathroom and do some breathing and come out. I'm like, and I was 35, 36, 37. And then I quit, ran the juvenile justice program, got my MSW, and then went back into Midtown Manhattan with 2 phones on my ear again, because I'm like, I got to make money. And I'd be on the train going, Bill, what is wrong? Like, why are you here? Why aren't you teaching blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, so I thought it was my ego, but I realized it was this, I was being impelled by, I needed to close that loop. I couldn't just go off and be this kind of new agey yoga teacher from Wilton, Connecticut, who used to work at Salomon Brothers. Like, it's a great story, but a part of me didn't feel complete. I felt like I didn't close that loop. I couldn't give you that language or describe it like that 12 years ago, but a part of me just knew I had to close that loop. Was it difficult? Dude, I wept.
How did you handle this onslaught of emotion?
I did enough work at night to exercise those muscles, like working out. I mean, workout, but I mean like sitting and just processing all this old sadness and all this old, like, oh my God, help me make it through tomorrow. And I think I came back with a lot more metal than I thought I did, because when I look back, talk about white knuckling it. I was white knuckling it almost on a daily basis for a bunch of years. I could give you years where it was okay, depending on the cycle, that 7-year cycle, 07 was fine. 08 was okay. Got a good paying job. Then they laid everybody off, and then like 10, 11, 12, I started doing counseling on the side, which was giving me some of that currency, some of that return. But during the day, just like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Like, how am I going to make it? How am I going to feed these 3 kids? And some of my buddies knew the depths. Most I hid it from, and it would come out, when we'd be partying on a Friday or Saturday night, and I was like the shamanic crazy dude. Yeah. And that was a lot of that excess
Yeah,
stuff.
that's what it sounds like. It must have been really isolating. So on top of the emotional enema that you're receiving, you don't really have many resources to turn to help you process it.
When I look back, the word shadowboxing was really the only way I could describe it. I was literally shadowboxing in Connecticut in this high materializing world. And I just was waiting for 6 o'clock to roll around so I could just not have to shadow box at the length I was having to do on a daily, nine to 5. And my wife knew it, and, she was supportive, and then she couldn't get supportive. She's like, I got to keep this nest going. And so you've got to get your shit together. Like, we don't have a choice here, Bill. Like, unless you're giving me another choice here, we don't have a choice. So buck up, my friend. And I respect her for that. Didn't always respect her for that, but I misspeak. I always respect for that. But there was times where I was doing the best I can, and I was at least continuing to do therapy on myself and do the work on myself. And what I always begrudged, and she knows this, is that she wasn't doing any work on herself. She's always like, I don't have time. I got kids. I don't have time. Like, that's not a good excuse. That's not an adult excuse. That's an adolescent excuse. It was lonely. It was lonely as heck. But I think that was just part of the shamanic process. I think I had to unwind a lot more stuff than I realized. I thought I was pretty darn good by the year 05, 06, right? So now that's 10 years in. When I started working at a nonprofit, I'm like, this is me. This is where I'm at. And then I realized this isn't enough. This is, and I, not to belabor the point here, but
no.
I hit a crossroad in September. It was 05, actually, about to be 06. And I hit a cross point because I started teaching yoga to fellow juvenile justice workers around the Northeast. They had this conference, and they offered, like, hey, come up here and teach a skill. And I did this shamanic relaxation yoga thing up in Vermont. And I came back, and my boss calls me. He's like, I don't know what's happening, but they're calling. They want, these people want to talk to you. They want you to do it now at all these conferences. And so, are you game? I'm like, yeah, I'm game for anything, right? And I came home to Linda. I said, sweetie, I'm at a crossroads here, because this is where I want to be. I want to be able to now do this and fan out and really teach this work in depth. But I was working part-time for this financial company, and they were paying me enough where I could feed the family, like $4,000 a month or $5,000 a month. Not like rent. They're paying me $5,000 a month. I'm like, I don't think I can. And I remember standing in my bedroom going, here it is, Bill, here's the crossroad. And I chose to go back to Caesar, render on to Caesar. Mm-hmm. And Lord knows where I'd be now. But I feel like that was a decision that had to be made then. And, so that's 17 years ago. 17 years ago, wow. Right? So,
wow.
Yeah.
The tension of maintaining. I mean, it's Chris, like we don't even have an easy way of holding together the different pieces of what makes you, right? Like the polarizing logic that we have all of late, recent decades maybe, been conditioned to think with makes it nearly impossible to imagine a hedge fund guy who's moonlighting as a social worker. That seems... It was
such a non sequitur. And people would laugh going, wait, you have LCSW on your signature. I was putting it in there because I was proud of that.
Yeah.
But I never took stock. I'm like, whatever. And I just have to say, you asking me these questions, I don't think anybody's ever asked me these questions. If they have, they don't have the sensibility that you're bringing to these questions, because as a young father now, it's theory until you actually have a child. Mm-hmm. Not theory. You understand.
Oh yeah.
What when a male taps into the Kundalini feminine, he better strap his ass in, because there's no turning back. And once you turn that first layer back, you can't seal it again. There was times where people would ask me, are you really glad you meditated? And I'm like, in public, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And I'd come home going, I should have maybe never let that fucking genie out of the bottle.
Mm-hmm. Say more about what the Kundalini thing is that you're talking about for folks who might have.
Yeah, good question. It is this non-physical latent energy that every single culture since the beginning of time has known exists in every single sentient being, every single thing in the planet, in the universe. So the tree has this, how a seed becomes a big oak tree is, you call it prana, whatever, but what the ancients have called it is this singular point that separates into the yin yang, feminine, masculine. That is the energy that creates growth and movement in the plane. So at the tip of our spine is what they call this Kundalini, which is called the coiled snake, which is the Fibonacci sequence spiral that exists in the planets, in the universes, in the solar system, and at the tip of the human spine, and at the tip of the dog spine and the squirrel spine. It's the singular energetic force that has to break open, and it spirals up. And then once we let that genie out of the bottle, we let it up our spine. That's what all our meditation work is about. That's all about the straight spine. The straight spine and the breath is the most important thing. Everything else is secondary. It's a straight spine, which elicits and awakens the thing they call the Kundalini energy. Go to a doctor's office. You see the caduceus? Mm-hmm. What's the caduceus? That's the Kundalini
snake.
That's the snake coming up. Yep, snake. Yep, yeah. The unwinding. Yep. And
so not to interject, but no, so you're saying that having a straight spine matters, so that there's something. Mindfulness is not a euphemism for laziness or rest that you need. You might need to do both of those things, but they're different.
Not only is straight spine important, lying down and doing visualization, lying down and dreaming are all powerful modalities. There is nothing more powerful on the planet for the human being to get his spine like a tree.
You got me working on my posture.
That is the wake up. And what the ancient Kabbalah says, which all the ancients have said, but the Kabbalah, you can look it up. They say, as soon as a human being does this one time and fully starts to sit long enough where we don't know it, well, we'll know if Kundalini has been woken up. How? You're going to have a funky dream. The next day, you're going to be like, oh my God, where is that memory from? Oh my God, how did that just, like, there's something will start to move. And the Kabbalah say, when a human being does that, they begin the process of healing. Healing's not my favorite word because it's either exclusive or inclusive. I don't even know, but it's a word that's used too much. They begin the process of unwinding and coming to terms with karmic biomagnetic experiences 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. That's how big this process is. And my experience was, I didn't have language for this, but in 96, when I started sitting, my grandfather had been dead for 7 years. He started coming back to me in my dreams when I started learning yoga. So I started doing meditation. My whole body was peeling, like breaking open. I started doing acupuncture. I'm like, oh my God. And I started doing yoga. He started coming back to me. 3 dreams, he'd come back to me like, can you teach me yoga? He'd been dead for 7 years. So it wasn't theory to me. It wasn't some kind of esoteric, macro statement. It was happening. And I'd have forward-looking dreams. I would have a dream, and 2 days later, I'm in it, right? That's deja vu. Deja vu is, it's happened. Where does it happen? In our dream state. Because in the dream state, in our alpha state, which is the meditation state, when the brain starts to go down the cycles at 7 to 10, which is alpha, instead of beta, where we're at right now, we're in Mother Nature zone. We're in Gaia zone. We're the tree. The tree right now, the cells in that tree are moving at 7 to 10 cycles a second.
What you're describing is fascinating and compelling, but it also in a way is terrifying to imagine. Like, and I mean, I've spoken with enough,
and it's supposed to be terrifying.
And
let me tell you, it is terrifying because you're going to peel back to a truth that our rational mind is designed to repel.
Yeah.
Reticular activating system, right? We know that's where the left and right brain come together. The neocortex and the limbic, the emotional, come together in the reticular RAS. And the neocortex is designed to keep old memories down because the neocortex wants to filter, outline, and move forward. doesn't want to move back, wants to move forward. And
sounds like
terrifying.
culture. Mm-hmm.
The masculinizing Piscean age mentality, which we are breaking open and through now, is about yesterday's is done. Don't worry about burning that tree. Don't worry about cutting those ancient trees. Don't worry about that stuff. Let's move on tomorrow. Let's advance. It's what the white Europeans came here to do, is like manifest destiny was kind of a totally misguided spiritual compulsion.
Yeah, that's very well said.
That's rational.
That tells the truth of the history, but also kind of gets the moral onus not off of their shoulders, but it situates that they weren't doing this on purpose necessarily. It was something like indwelt that was compelling this movement forward. It was a tragic movement, right? Like there's lots of consequences,
and it's tragic when we become so convinced that it's ours. Mm-hmm. Like they believe this land had been granted to them by some spiritual edict. Mm-hmm. And I don't begrudge the enthusiasm. I don't begrudge the desire for something new. But if it doesn't involve the left and right brain, if it doesn't involve the yin and the yang, if it doesn't involve, that's why waking up involves the left and right. If it doesn't involve the right brain, which is emotive and inclusive, the Aquarian era, Aquarian, the feminine, if it doesn't include the feminine, which is what those single God religions had expunged, the feminine, because they were scared of it. So they come with a fear of feminine here, and all the native cultures are all feminine.
Wow.
The women elders did all the decision making in the long tables and the Cherokee and the Iroquois and all. It was all feminine based. Every ancient culture has been feminine based.
Yeah, the history of religions ends up a place where 1970s old school, OG feminists were becoming empowered into their feminism and activism by way of the history of religions, because they were jaded, many of them, from traditional Christian theology, especially versions of monotheism that do what you just described. They push the woman and the feminine down and out of the picture. And don't you think it's they're a liability or a product? Yeah, I do. I think,
or not. What's your?
No. I think that's a compelling case can be made that it's based on the fear of the power that had been associated with the feminine. I can't, as a scholar, say that is definitively what the dynamic is. We don't have the evidence, but I can tell you that many of my predecessors in my field, generations prior, were empowered into their activism by a kind of even-handed, objective assessment of the history of religions, noting that this is not the father marks a moment in time where he is resting high on the throne, so to speak, but there was a story before that. And that's where folks turn to, folks like Mary Daly and lots of others. I could go on about that, but yeah, they were empowered. My point is, they weren't activists who became scholars. They were scholars who transformed into activists because of the objective studies that they were engaged in. Yeah.
It's. I just have to comment that. Yeah. I rarely get to speak to somebody who has bridged, and I'm not trying to blow any wind here, but you've bridged the inner work because you're doing your inner work, but you have this incredible bank of knowledge. You to be able to, like, I can quote you some Yogananda and some Joseph Campbell, right? That's pretty, but like you've really taken the scholarship, academic rigor and research and combine the two. And that's why your process is, that's why it really is, you are a unique bird.
I appreciate that. It's a work in progress, especially the blending of the two things. I mean, that's one of the motivations for what we're doing here, right? Yep. Is as a scholar of religion, I've been taught to disbelieve any sort of experiential claim, whether that is Jesus coming to you in the middle of the night and these are real life examples, for instance, either anointing you or raping you. It runs the gamut of claims that get made when you study religion. And so it makes a certain kind of sense to have a posture of disbelief or agnosticism. But there's a trend to kind of quarantine, no pun intended, I'm not trying to get topical, but to quarantine those belief-based claims from the scholarship, the real objective work that we're supposedly trained to do. And I've done too much study on race, on social issues to know that, I mean, we're all carrying a whole bunch of baggage, our opinions, our front loading, our objective analyses, whether we want them to or not. And that's right or left. It's not a covert slight on one group. That's just how we are. And so that caused me to have, to turn the skepticism back towards the academic community. And now I'm deeply motivated to really question this 40-year plus story that we've been told in what I do in the study of religion, that we have to somehow be skeptical of these experiences, when in fact everything, I mean, if we were in a classroom, I'd be talking all about David Hume and how everything's based on experience anyway, even the scientific method, but that's neither here nor there. We don't have to get into that. But I think that for me, I've been trained to do a certain kind of study in a way that staves off awareness of experiences or put quarantines it, like I said. Yep. But I've also had a similar awakening to the one that you were describing. And frankly, I don't know what the fuck to do with myself these days because of it, whether that is putting my career and my professional goals on the hot seat to assess what my priorities are in that area, or how to be a father, or how to be a man in this age of the feminine, this return to this age of Aquarius, this new space that we find ourselves in. And as you were talking, I was struck thinking, holding together on the one hand, the narrative, that history, that long history you were describing about how religions and the feminine goddess stuff was there, and then monotheism got hyper masculine, and then we're here now in this new point. But at the same time, the Roe v. Wade decision, that's where we are now for folks listening, whenever you're listening. That just happened a few weeks ago. And it strikes me that this is still a liminal space. We haven't arrived fully to whatever new place that we're in. There are some folks who are eager to get there, and other folks who don't know how to get there. And then there are folks who are kicking and screaming, having tantrums. And these are not small quantities of people, right? Like, everyone seems confused and a bit, I don't know, worried about where we're headed. So maybe I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, but also how can mindfulness help us in that? Maybe we try and shift the direction of what we're talking about towards that.
So, boy, it's such an amazing topic. And I purposely didn't pre-game or take notes, because I wanted to be fully present in the dialogue. And as you were, when you said liminal space and you said Roe versus Wade, I just divided my paper in half, because I really think Roe versus Wade has so much less to do with abortion. Because if you think about it, and trust me, I'm not dispelling the incredible crime that overturning a 50-year law itself is especially a woman, the sacredness, talk about the feminine, the sacredness of the feminine body. I mean, it's just a perfect example of the last gasp of the Piscean age, taking a shot at the feminine body.
Yeah, remind me to say something about that.
Yeah, but what it really is, if you think about it, certainly frontline women that have issues regarding they have to get an abortion, that's one big thing. But the big outcry really is coming from people that have nothing, are going to get an abortion, men, women, that it's not about them having to get an abortion or even knowing people that have to get an abortion. It is the crassness and the balls to use the political side of the aisle, because unless I'm wrong, it's driven by a very small part of the population that got enough power. It's the very thing that we're trying to unwind, which is the few making decisions for the many and the few that aren't conscious. And I don't mind a super high conscious, left, right brain activated, aware body of people, masculine if need be, men if need be, but a combination, making decisions that incorporate truths and the right decisions. The same decision that a tree makes to go towards the sun, that's a pure decision of going towards the light, if you will. And I'm not being new agey. So Roe and Wade to me is so much less about abortion, even though of course it is, and I'm not dispelling that. I have to say that over and over again. It's about people feeling undone. It's about people feeling like, I'm tearing up just feeling the inequity, the it's like killing something. It's like literally killing the spirit of something that, whether you agree with, should people use protection and all that kind of stuff? Yeah, regardless of all that, you're sucking the spirit out of a culture trying to continue to honor every last corner of our culture, not the white well-to-do. And it was a white well-to-do crowd that made a decision. And let's ask those Supreme Court folks, have you ever had a needed abortion? Have you ever had a friend that's been raped? Have you ever had a relative? Like, do you see the value of this law, where if it's going to help one person and it's not who's it hurting? I guess the Christians are upset. They're fine with high-powered rifles killing little kids. But for some reason, they have a bug in the ointment about something that they believe has a religious base.
How do we I have a shitload of questions, but the one that strikes me as the most practically important is, how do we have this conversation in a way that doesn't put them on the defensive? How do we, I guess, hold space is the word for it. When this, I practically and politically, I agree with everything you said, but tactically, how can we convince folks of the consequences? Not for them, I don't mean in a punitive way, but the way you just described the death, a kind of death of a zeitgeist, something of on that size, And
on that note, I want to answer your question, but on that note, in a way, nobody was thinking about what was right or wrong about abortion, right? And then suddenly it came to the fore again. And I think that's another kind of continuation of what I see as this. It's not about abortion necessarily. It's about, why are you raising this up now? What has it done to you? Mm-hmm. And what good is it serving you, the decision makers? What good is it serving, a very angry Christian in Alabama? Like, tell me what's wrong with this. Oh, you're killing an unborn entity. I get that. But what are you doing with the living entity in which that entity is being stored in? Do you have some sympathy? Mm-hmm. Even if you don't agree with it? What would happen if you just, I don't know how, but what happens if you just put your picket down and go home and live your life and be present and be emotional and do something good? If that's your way of doing good, remember that it's a kind of a thesis you're working off of, because you've really undone potentially the life of a living entity that's here right now. And so I just want to be careful when I make decisions. I want to make sure, as the Native Americans always say, they make a decision based on how's it going to impact the next 100 years. And so how do we have a dialogue with a very dug in, highly convicted, faith-based person? I've tried, and not on this topic, and I've tried within this kind of tone, asking a really nice young man a couple of years ago living in Texas. We were having these great conversations on like yoga and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, did you know some of the lost years, Jesus was actually in India and he was learning, he was traveling the world, and Joseph of Arimathea, that was his uncle, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, what? And then we'd have another conversation the next day. Like, it was in the bathroom, like literally at an office in Austin. And I said, listen, John, I just have to ask you, I don't believe he was the singular one. I think he's one of the great avatars, if not the greatest avatar of all time. But if I'm not following it with the singularity with which you're following that, if I can't do that, because he's like, oh, you should come down to our center sometime. I'm like, if I don't feel that, can we develop a relationship? He's like, no, we can't. So he shut down a potential, just a friendship based on a thesis. And so, imagine if you and I couldn't get through some kind of thesis you had that I didn't necessarily agree with, and we couldn't be friends. That to me is the crime, because as Robert Monroe said, and people should study Robert Monroe, his 3 books, Far Journey, Ultimate Journey. He spent, every night out of body and coming back. He's like, all we're here to do is have shared experience. That's all we're here to do. All we take with us is this shared moment right now. Whatever we garner from this, whatever emotional impact and insight and how it affects the cells in my heart to have this conversation, to be able to emote, this shared experience is all we take with us. And it goes into eternity. So if I'm making a decision that's going to really hurt somebody, that's going to come back. That's going to echo back somehow in the person making the decision. But it's very exclusive. I don't know, Chris, you tell me, how do you have those combos?
I used to think that education was the answer, and it's still important, but that would take us in a different direction. If I want
to add this, is that I have an amazing young man that has done some work for me in the financial field. He does part-time work for me. Maybe you'll listen to someday, he probably won't. And I'm always sending him stuff going, he's fully into the Christian singularity. And I love it. It's beautiful. He's just good with people. He helped me on the sales side. I said, I'm just dropping this in. I just want you to be expand, because I fear that 10 years from now, you're going to stay in this zone and you're going to miss some stuff. And I'm not saying I'm just saying, I want to add it to your database. And he'll try. He's like, I can't go there. And so I'm like, I just want you to know that you are so intelligent. You're so emotionally intelligent, and you have such this incredible ability to relate to people. But you really got to make sure, especially when you have kids, is you want them to be as expansive as possible. That tree is not going to hold back just because that oak tree down the street might get into its space. It's not ever going to hold back. It's going to continue to press forward. And that's my hope and my joy. My dream is just to help other people press forward. That's what meditation is. I'm trying to push you and any other person I interact with, push into self to wake it up. And we do it internally, and we do it with little snippets of new data, entering new data, always entering new perspective. You can sift it and filter it, but not letting the new data in to then use your sensibility to filter it is really denying yourself and the community A shutting down person is not added to the community. We need to try to be added to our community before we leave this 3D plane. Be additive. And the shutting down of Roe versus Wade, the shutting down is not additive. It is separating and dividing. And that's
reactionary.
It's reactionary.
Well.
And that tree and that squirrel are not separating and dividing. They are including. They are including. Everything in Mother Earth is including. A weed comes up, it's going to be included with the grass. Grass doesn't really have a choice. But just allow it and see what that weed can do. See, it sounds so new agey, but that's what we're here to do.
Yeah. Wow.
So tell me I get your quick take on Roe versus Wade.
My basic position for a number of years now has been to follow the insights of a British anthropologist named Mary Douglas. I mentioned Mary Daly earlier, but I'm talking about Mary Douglas, and I brought along a quote from her. It connects, I think, quite clearly to what the stakes really involve. You mentioned that it's not really about babies. I agree. I think it has everything to do with women, and it has to do with women's bodies in particular, and who feels. This is where mindfulness, I think, matters for the conversation. Who has the emotional perception of having control over women's bodies. So in concrete, stark terms, an autonomous, sentient woman has control over her body in most cases. But we're living in a culture, and I think monotheism ends up having a lot to do with why this happened. Men perceive a lack of control over their own bodies. And I think this is a place where mindfulness can help with emotional intelligence, emotional awareness, emotional bandwidth, understanding how our bodies react to this or that. I don't just mean a nice ass or whatever. I mean that in a comprehensive way, although I'm including the desire, like sexual desire as an example of that. But essentially, monotheism created a dynamic where men are disconnected from whatever the fuck's going on inside of ourselves, and we end up preoccupying ourselves with other people, and the first other in that system is the woman. That is what happens within monotheism as it concerns women's bodies. Women's bodies, we tend to, men have a history, not all of us necessarily, maybe not.
No, we all do.
Have a history of talking about women's bodies in instrumental ways, right? That's what it means to objectify a woman when you see her. You're thinking about what kind of end can she serve for me or for you or us, the community. But we're thinking about her we're talking about her in that kind of way. But following Douglas, I'm of the opinion that that's just cover. It's not happening. It is happening, and it's problematic in its own ways, but it's concealing a deeper need. The thing that we need is not that fine ass or that pretty face or whatever. That's what we say we need, and that's what we perceive we need in that moment. But what we're really doing there is forging a sense of who it is that we are by talking to one another, or by even thinking, by talking to ourselves about that woman. And so here's the quote that I wanted to bring in. She says, "The physical body can have universal meaning only as a system which responds to the social system, expressing it as a system." So here, I'm pausing, but here, immediately think of what an autonomous, free, liberated woman represents for folks who have been inculcated and grown up in a system where the meanings, those universal meanings that they hold women in a particular light. It's going to be troubling. The very existence of that liberated woman is going to be troubling for folks who are working within a system which has always held that woman in an objectified light. And objectified is a word that's lost a lot of its meaning because it's been politicized and things like that.
I'm crude.
I'm meaning it in a technical sense when we're thinking about a woman as an object, not necessarily a sexual object, but just she only matters to the extent she matters for me. And that any experience that pushes against that is going to be worth fighting over for a big chunk of folks within the monotheistic tradition. If you think about it, the only person who's able to determine whether a baby is born or not is God and man as God's proxy. But women within that tradition, at least the sacred texts, don't bear out that women have much to offer beyond that or beyond their use as a vessel for bringing in babies. So she continues, she says, what it symbolizes, the physical body, naturally is the relation of parts of an organism to the whole. So here she's not talking about what it symbolizes for just right-wing Christians or anyone else. She's saying that bodies in nature, that is the jaguar's body itself. We might think about her saying that our physical body is the thing that holds together the part and the whole. It is the fractal that shows the ability to move and scale one way or another. So we're always going to be preoccupied with bodies. She says natural symbols can express the relation of an individual to his society at that general systemic level. She's saying that everywhere. The two bodies at work, though, she says, are the self and society. Sometimes they are so near as to be almost merged. Sometimes they are far apart. The tension between them allows the elaboration of meaning. And here, my suggestion, my thinking about why what women do with their bodies matters so much to so many in the West. And it matters whether you're in a Scandinavian country or France or other Western countries, and obviously including the U.S. This issue is a hot button issue. It's on tilt right now in the U.S. because of the recent decision on Roe v. Wade. But what women are or are not able to do with their own bodies is a hotly debated topic across the entire Christian West. You got to ask yourself why that is. It goes back to what you were saying initially in our conversation. There was something about the shift from, you call it polytheism or animism, up into monotheism that divested women of whatever sort of social and cultural authority and power they had been wielding. And any expression of that is a problem. And here's where it gets really, on the one hand, tragic in terms of the circumstances themselves, but also, for me, explainable. The stakes and why this matters so much, because within monotheism, the highest expression of divinity has always been the right to kill. Always.
Wow.
How does Abraham get tested by God in terms of expressing his own devotion to God? God tells Abraham he's got to kill his own fucking kid. So it's not as if abortion as an activity is somehow not present in the biblical record.
Wow.
It is indeed more than just present. It is an expression of God's status. Now, within the story on Mount Moriah, as it plays out with Abraham and Isaac, God's like, I was just psych. You showed me what I needed.
I like your conviction. You don't need to execute.
Yeah. That's exactly the point that gets made. He said, look, your willingness to do it is what I needed to know. So you can go ahead and keep them alive. Now, women who experience similar situations on the chopping block, so to speak, in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, they don't tend to fare as well as Isaac did. But that can be its own kind of story. But my point is that women within this, and I'm following Douglas here, kind of paraphrasing her a bit and building on what she was saying, women are this canvas for symbolization, is a quote from her, within Western monotheism. And there's reasons for that. It's in a nutshell because monotheism hasn't ever done the one thing it needs to do, which is to tell us who the fuck we are. It doesn't do that. And so we stay preoccupied with other people. And then women are wonderful and beautiful. And so there's a natural component to why we've been preoccupied with women. And there's a whole lot of social and cultural components that are anything but natural. It's not natural to denigrate women. It's not befitting, or it's not in the best interest of a man who wants to make babies. It's not the things we associate with misogyny or patriarchy. They're not natural. But and for what it's worth, in the history of religions, classically, these monotheistic traditions that we call them today, they used to be called patriarchal religions. That didn't mean a different thing then as it does as what it means now. It meant the same thing then. We just have it hits our ear differently than it used to. Here we have a situation with a woman's right to choose. It's not about abortion. That's a sleight of hand tactic by the Christian right that's been effective in terms of its marketing and PR. But it is, killing a baby is not something anyone ever signs up to do. Except, of course, if you're a man in charge of a monotheistic religion. But seriously, though, no one is disputing the tragic aspects of that sort of situation or experience. No one is. So the issue really has to do with women and women's bodies. It's not about protecting babies. It's about controlling women. And this is where Douglas helps so much, because women, it turns out, are the canvas. And think of that in terms of art. They are the canvas for symbolization. So for humans, at least the Western ones associated with monotheism, women have always ended up the thing that we paint with all of our meanings, all of the ways that we either do or don't make full or better sense of ourselves. And we do that. It makes tragically obvious sense why we would do that, because we lost those meanings when we prevented those women from being in charge of our religious well-being or our spiritual
educational,
journey,
spiritual, cultural, communal.
And so here we have this a whole lot of folks who, for tactical reasons, churches and other ecclesial institutions are fighting against education, because this is not, I'm not saying this is not a political soapbox. I'm saying I'm an objective scholar who's arrived at these findings. This is history dictating what I'm saying. It's not my opinion.
Yeah.
And what it turns out, what it looks like from my vantage point is the old gods are mad at the people, or not mad, but the old gods are coming to reclaim a certain degree of agency from the folks who have been the de facto gods over the last several thousand years. And that's going to be a Ragnarok kind of a scenario. It's going to be seismic in the effects. When the gods fight, right, humans are the ones to suffer. And so, like, the idea of a woman's right to choose is an expression of divinity. It has everything to do with what agency has been and what it has represented within this Western framework, which is tragic in its own right. If the right to kill is the highest expression of what it means to have power and authority in this land, no matter what side you're on, it's a tragic expression of the failure of our culture holistically to really offer anything even remotely close to what we would be capable of. if we could, well, I don't know that part. I wish I did, but.
That's amazing. What just the scope and the historical context and the symbolic context. And, you know, couple things came to mind while you're talking. One is that one of the most powerful, which we'll get into probably in one of the episodes, is, as the Hindus say and all the ancient cultures have said, all we are is the elements, right? All we are is this animated fire, water, earth, air, and then the fifth is ether, right? So that's all we are. We are infused with this, we're animated by something, but all we are is same thing as the tree. You have exactly the same thing. So this thing is sacred. Mm-hmm. And so they have this incredible, it's a 108-day exercise where you do a certain chant and you work on your, you do the earth element for 100 days. No, I think it's 44 days, whatever it is. And then you work on, and then you do one chant just on the water element. And then one chant, in other words, what you're doing is you're activating the elements of self, because that's all we are. We don't finish this life completely unless we fully express our bodily self, and all we are is elements. And so to make a decision on my elements, which is the only thing sacred, it's the most sacred thing. I can only be in this life, in this world, in this 3D plane, if I've got my elements, filled with air, and we're one breath away. Number one. So that is sacrosanct. And then the most important thing, as you were talking, is the word adolescent, immature, and the male, the body male of that's will be transformed over the coming epoch, the next 20, 30 years. You can see it happening now, all these young kids doing therapy and all these young men doing therapy. The basic interaction of the boy with mom, if that doesn't grow up and the mom doesn't kick the boy out so he grows up and understands his own vulnerability, that boy becomes a man who's afraid and wants to own a woman. How many 50-year-old dudes are dating, breaking up with their mature wife, who's seeking them to mature and grow up and own and take responsibility? Most men don't want to do that. So they go back to the young women, because the young women won't force them to mature and grow up. And so really, if you think about these decisions, I feel like there are religious sects that don't want to grow up, that don't want to mature, that don't want to include their vulnerability in their decisions. They want to objectify, like exactly what you want to say, what you're saying. If I get stuck in here, then I'm going to activate my vulnerability by imposing something on somebody else.
Bingo.
And that is pure, that's what a child does. That's what a 14-year-old does. Absolutely right. And so it's a boy is afraid of the mommy and longs for the mommy. And so if my mommy, when I was a little kid, my mom would go out at night, I was at home in third grade, like, I got to help you with my homework, right? I was longing for the mommy to be around me, the mommy energy. And when you were saying the freedom of the woman for a little boy, freedom for mommy, she means she won't be paying attention to me. And so literally, if you look at, just call it the monotheistic approach, the Christian approach is mommy. I need mommy. I can't grow up. I don't want to go out to the big, bad, dark world out there. I want to stay here. And yeah, it's just the immaturity of it all is really overwhelming. Masculine immaturity is why we are at where we are globally as a community. I agree. You put women in charge, they make decisions that they know will will impact, they'll make decisions based on the context of how's it going to impact a family, how's it going to impact a community. Men make decisions based on a much more singular approach, black or white, profit or no profit, good or bad. Those are divided perspectives, and the universe doesn't work on divides, it works on unifying. And the Roe versus Wade is a non-unifying, dividing, divisive decision that kills the spirit of the sacredness of the woman, but it really is killing the spirit of what we're trying to do, is become inclusive. Black, white, green, blue, purple, monotheistic, polytheistic. We're trying to include it all. And in the end, we will. What's that road going to look like? Well, here we are.
Wow. Well said. How about we shift to 10 or 12 minute activity.
You talking about my favorite exercise of all time?
Yeah, I'm talking about whatever you want to share with us.
Yeah. Part of what we've been talking about is on any topic, but when we approach our lives, when we approach the next day, when we approach our next couple hours, right? If we haven't meditated this day, if we haven't done our yoga, if we haven't done some kind of exercise to kind of open ourselves up, I like to do kind of like a pre-test, post-test, meaning what's my sensibility right now? Am I a little bit worked up? Am I a little bit fatigued from work? Am I thinking about all the things I didn't do, all those lack, all those things, right? And what I guarantee you is when we're going to check in with our sensibility right now, close our eyes and just kind of check in our body. How are we feeling? I feel a little tension in my back, my shoulder. I'm feeling a little bit like, I missed a few things at work, right? So we got those wheels and kind of those tension. And then we're going to go inside. And then when we go inside and we do some breathing, I want you to notice, and all who are listening, you're going to notice over time that when we go inside and spend 5 or 6 minutes paying attention to our elements, paying attention to our spine, paying attention to the action that's happening on the inside, as opposed to all the action that we're thinking about on the outside. And then when we come out of that, you're going to notice something's softer. The edges have been curved a little bit. The high octane attention you put on a subject, you're going to realize the subjects that actually matter. In other words, we pay less when we come out of this state after doing a little inner work. You're going to notice that same topic and that same energy you put on that topic might not be the same, because therefore it wasn't a topic you needed to put that much attention on. I don't need to put attention right now on, did my boss think I made the wrong decision today? Literally today. I'll come out and I'll feel like I'm just in my body, I'm just moving through time and space. That's the goal of all this work. All this inner work is realizing what the truth is, what we're really here to do. And you can't do that in that pre-state. We have to get to that post-state. So I figure we'll do, about 5 or 6 minutes of, we're going to do the breathing exercise with the head and the neck, if that's okay. Is that cool? Do you want me to give a little explanation of that for our yep. So there's a couple parts of the body that are high importance in terms of what's happening to the entire body. They call them chakras, they call them centers, they call them the locations on the body that are the most important on a basic level for the functioning. And that's the heart, and that's the solar plexus, and that's the back of the neck, and it's the midbrow. So for me, it's 4. Midbrow, it's called the ajna. The Hindus call it the eye of God. Got the back of the neck, which is the medulla, which the Hindus call the mouth of God. It's where a lot of the energy of the outer world comes into the body. We have the heart, which has 40,000 brain neurons for all the science focused folks out there that kind of want the data on it, which I love as well. 40,000 brain neurons right here in this part of your body, not here, here. Super intelligent location. And then you have the solar plexus, which is the largest ganglia of nerves in the body. I believe it's illegal to punch somebody in the solar plexus because you can kill them with one punch. That's how important this area is. And the reason we're focusing on these 4 areas is when we activate them, it starts sending signals for the glands in our body, these important glands, pituitary gland, pineal gland, thymus gland, to start secreting hormones that help the body relax and help the body process, recuperate, sleep better, eat better, live longer. Kind of a no-brainer. Like, it's a money back guarantee that if you do this, not because I said it or you said it, do the math on it. And we've spent 22 years doing the math and science on it. So we're going to focus on 4 centers. So right hand on our belly. Okay. And we are going to inhale. And when we inhale, we're going to push the belly out. So we're going to inhale, belly out, and we're going to bring our neck back. And then on the exhale, we're going to drop the head and squeeze the belly button to the back of the spine. And probably on our next session, we can get into the more nitty gritty and the fineries of this technique. But if you notice, my shoulders and spine do not move. Do not move. What moves is my belly in and out and my neck up and down. That's the rhythmic, and that's the action we'll get to at some point. It's like a boxer, right? In through the nose, out through the mouth, in through the nose, out through the mouth. But really important that what we're doing is we're loosening the hinges of the neck, which activates the medulla. And by breathing in and out of the belly, what we're doing is we're activating the solar plexus, which then activates the thymus, which then activates the pineal gland. So there's a lot of silent action happening when we do this basic exercise. In fact, we're going to do 2 sets of 10.
All right.
Okay. So just close your eyes, put your right hand on your belly, chin down. Perfect. So on my count, so we're going to inhale nose, belly out into the middle of the room, head, neck, head back. I want you to feel that tension in the back of your neck, and then exhale mouth, blow it out, belly down, squeezing that belly to the back of the spine. Okay, inhale nose. Big one. My belly is distended. Exhale mouth, dropping the chin. Inhale nose. Head back, belly out. Feel the tension in your neck. Exhale mouth, dropping the chin. Inhale nose. Exhale mouth. We're going to speed it up a little bit. Inhale nose. Belly out. Exhale mouth. Squeezing the belly button back to the spine. Inhale nose. Exhale mouth. Inhale nose. Belly out. Holding the tension in the neck. Exhale mouth. 3 more. Inhale nose. Belly out. Exhale mouth. Belly back to the spine. Inhale nose. Exhale mouth. Last one. Inhale nose. Belly out. Hold it. On my count, hold it. Belly's out, distended. Head is all the way back, feeling the tension. Exhale mouth. Exhale. Head up, eyes closed. Shoulders square. Spine is straight. So you can actually feel the tip of your spine almost. You can sense it on your rumpus right now, right on your rump, right? You can feel that spine in there. It's like the spine is the roots meeting the earth. And it's nice and straight. It's soft, but straight. Head down just a little bit, head forward. Perfect, right there. I want you to focus all your attention on the front and back of your stomach. 95% of all the serotonin produced in your body, what is serotonin? It's the relaxant hormone. 95% is produced in the stomach, in the gut. That gut feeling is not a term, some kind of made up term. It's actually a scientific reality. Our gut is thinking right now. It's feeling right now. It's wondering right now. It's sensing right now. It's picking up information right now. And now I want you to focus on your heart, front and back. The mightiest of the mightiest, the heart. There is no part of the body more important to your life experience. It is literally the forgotten domain of our current human culture, our global community. We do not spend enough time right here in our hearts because our rational self is very on edge about an old memory, an old sensation, an old feeling of being left behind, of being hurt, of sadness. But every single feeling, every single emotion you've ever had for this lifetime, and even all our relatives' lifetime, are stored right here. There's nothing your heart cannot solve. There's nothing your heart does not know. There's nothing your heart cannot withstand. We're just afraid to give it a shot. You to focus on the back of your neck, the front and back of your neck. This is the fifth chakra. It's the dark color blue. This is the creative center of the body. It's where we voice ourselves out into the world. I want you to imagine energy, light coming into the back of your neck right now, filling your body. Then now I want you to focus on the middle of your forehead. I want you to actually lift your eyeballs up to the center of your forehead, about an inch above your eyebrows. And I want you to hold your pinched, upwardly focused eyeballs into the middle of your forehead. Go look at a dollar sometime. It has a pyramid on it. It has the third eye, actually an eyeball. By focusing on your midbrow, you start to activate the pineal gland. The pineal gland is this little pine cone shaped gland in the center of your skull that secretes melatonin and serotonin, the relaxing hormones. That's where that 5% of the serotonin is produced. The rest is that melatonin, which automatically sends the body into its parasympathetic state, which is pure relaxation. It's called the safe space. Your body knows and your brain knows it's safe. I can relax. And then it can start recuperating. And now I want you to focus on the top of your head, the crown chakra, top of your head. Belly, front and back. Heart, front and back. Neck, front and back. Midbrow, top of head. Imagine the sense of this, you being in a temple right now. Because you are in a temple. The body, that the mind, the neocortex, the youngest part of the brain, the thing that wants to rationalize and cogitate and sort out, spreadsheet, determine, and figure out. It's the only part of the body that's nervous about the rest of the body. It's nervous about emotions. It's nervous about old feelings. It would rather move forward in time. Not the heart. Not the heart. Heart wants to be right here. Before we do another set, I want you to notice what your heart wants right now. What does your heart want right now? Get the body into this position. This is when we really get a chance to hear our heart. Do one more set of 10 if you don't mind. Okay, chin down, hand on the belly. We're gonna rip through this set of 10. Okay, chin down to the chest, all the way down, all the way down. Perfect. If you can do that, great. Okay, inhale, nose, head back, belly out. Exhale, mouth. Drop the head. Good. Inhale, nose. Exhale, mouth. Drop the head. Inhale nose. Exhale mouth. Drop the head. Inhale nose. Belly out. Exhale mouth. Belly in. Good. Inhale nose. Big push, belly out. Big push, much more than the last one. Push, 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 push. Exhale mouth. Inhale nose. Belly out. Exhale mouth. Inhale nose. Exhale mouth. Two more. Inhale nose. Exhale mouth. Inhale nose. Exhale mouth. Spine straight, shoulders square, head forward, eyes closed. Focus on the belly, front and back. I also want you to focus on the bottom of your feet, front and back. Top and bottom, I should say. Focus on the very tip of your spine. Right by your buttocks, right at the very bottom of your buttocks. Focus on that. Focus on your belly, front and back. Thank your belly for all the work it does. Focus on your heart, front and back. Focus on the back of your heart more. Focus on it. Feel it. Imagine being literally inside the four chambers. Focus on your neck, front and back. Focus on the middle of your forehead. Lift your eyeballs up. That's it. Lift them up. That's it. It's almost like you're pinching, you're squeezing the very center of your forehead to gaze up. 45-degree angle, eyeballs up. Focus on the top of your head. Come back to the middle of your forehead. Notice what you feel, what you sense, what you think with your eyeballs gazing through the middle of your forehead at a 45-degree angle. Go look at your history books and mythology books. It's a symbol of the pine cone. There's this huge pine cone statue at the Vatican. You know what that is? That's the pineal gland. The word pineal means pine cone. That's how sacred this activating gland is to the human experience. It opens up our sense of the layers that exist in us. What do you call them? Dimensional, experiential, spiritual, psychoemotional, biomagnetic, are all activated. Our ability to comprehend our place in the universe begins when we focus on the pineal gland. There is no culture that has not put the pine cone as one of the most sacred symbols when we talk about symbology. It's an activating force. It's an activation of the Kundalini. It will transport you. You will transcend the 3D plane and see the singularity and universality of everything by focusing right here for as long as you can every single day. And before we open our eyes, to yourself silently, we're going to do one big Om. So it would sound like this, Om, but you're going to do it silently. So big inhale into the nose, belly out, hold it, and a really, really loud silent Om inside. That's it.
Damn.
So notice the body right now. Notice your sensibility. Notice how your body begins to come awake, not subject to the drip of thoughts that constrain it.
Yeah, I know what you're describing.
The very act of thinking, this is the science, the very act of thinking uses blood flow. And so you've actually sent all this blood, when we're overthinking, to the brain. Now watch, go into parasympathetic. The brain's like, I can release that now. What are you releasing? What's in the blood? Oxygen. So you're oxygenating your heart, your solar plexus. You're like, whoa, my heart's breathing again. It gets constricted.
That's what it feels like.
Not good or bad thought, just thought itself.
You know what it felt like during the towards the end of the first series, and then in the middle, as you were moving up the chakras, I felt fatigue, as if it was my first wind coming to a conclusion while running. You know, like feeling completely wiped out of nowhere, and you just know you have to plow through it. And I plowed through it.
Exactly. Yeah. And the beautiful thing, I'll have to say, and then we're going to wrap it up, is that if you're ever meditating and you're tired, lie down, because that's your body saying, I am tired, right? Instead of doing coffee or caffeine or, whatever we do to resist the very demands of the body, what we're doing is we're listening to the body for the first time in our day or our life.
Wow.
And so if people are like, oh, I can't meditate because I'm tired. Well, sleep. Then when you wake up, get your ass straight again. Get back up again.
Super helpful. The other thing physiologically that was happening for me is, I'm not saying I have wings that come out of my heart, but imagine if I had wings.
If you just said it, you do. Sorry.
Imagine if I had wings in the back of my heart, where they would be, felt and still feels incredibly fatigued. Like I could not, the muscles are atrophied. And I had to, at a certain point, take relief. I really did, because it was just too strenuous.
Think of that.
Yeah. So
think of that. The eternal position is uncomfortable, unnatural these days. And that right there is emblematic of decisions that get made by an atrophied body of people.
Wow.
And so we have to unatrophy. Growth and awareness is not a thought. It's an experience of the straightened spine, of the activated pineal gland, of the activated medulla, and the activated heart. So anybody that's like this making decisions, it's not the truth.
They're not going to be what they could be. Whether you're right, left, independent, or otherwise.
It's apolitical, it's
comprehensive.
A decision that's not made that incorporates the yin and yang is not a real big boy decision. It's not a decision that has universal ramifications and vibrations and sensibility.
Wow. That's a mic drop moment if I've ever heard one, and an invitation to join us for the next episode.
When I see people these days, and have been doing it for the last 25 years, just through my own kind of waking up my body, and I can look at the body posture, and I could probably give 2 or 3, identify where in their life they're having issues, insecurity, sadness, right? Sadness is stored in the lungs. So you see some similar, that's just their dad browbeat them, their grandfather browbeat them. That's a very sad body.
Wow.
That's a generalization, but the body's telling us. The body's telling us. So your body was telling you exactly where you have fatigue, which is beautiful, where you're gonna continue to put blood flow and oxygen into that part of the body. And another technique we're gonna do is the Kriya Yoga, where we tense and release. It's the ancient 10,000-year-old practice that we literally tense the body and release. And this act automatically activates and brings blood to the place of the body that we don't realize we need. I want to leave with one more thought.
Yeah.
Is when we do this, when we activate the Kundalini, we sit straight, the body has a reboot button. The soul, whatever animates us, has a reboot button. It knows exactly what part of the body and what old karma and what old sensation, what old emotions, what old memories need to be kicked up. People are like, well, I meditate, I don't really know what to do then. You don't have to do anything. Your body has an intelligence. It knows where it needs work, right? You were told where it needs work. I need some work here. Whatever. I don't mean like, oh, you need work.
Yeah.
The body goes, I could use a little bit of attention right here.
A little tune up. Yeah.
Right? in silence. You got all the information.
Wow. It's incredible.
Good stuff.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Bill. This is wonderful.
I'll talk to you this weekend.
Absolutely.
Good. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Have a good
I'll see you.
Bye.